you a visual learner or a kinesthetic learner, or maybe an auditory learner? What if I told you that all of those learning styles are BS and they might actually be holding you back from getting the results you want and helping your clients from getting the results they want? Welcome back to another episode of the Cozypreneur Podcast. If this is your first time listening, Cozypreneur is all about helping you make money and work with the dreamiest of clients. So grab your beverage, get your cozy socks on, and let's dive in. Today, we are joined by our guest, Lauran Kerr-Heraly, an executive functioning coach who helps families of middle, high school, and college students learn strategies they need to succeed academically and in life too. So welcome, Lauran.
Thank you.
So I actually asked Lauran to be on the show because I read one of her blog posts and I literally had this topic on like my podcast ideas and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to bring Lauran on because I already want to talk about this. So before we dive into what this means for you and your business, Lauran, can you tell us a little bit about like what are learning types and why are they an outdated idea?
Sure. So I have been an educator for about 20 years. I'm currently a community college professor and an executive function coach. Recently, as a couple years ago, when I was teaching college prep classes, this was part of what we taught students, like how to know if you're an auditory learner, like do you learn best from listening to people talk? And the idea behind it is supposed to be that if you know how you learn best, then you'll learn better. But the reason these ideas are outdated is because they're not really based on actual science. They're based on sort of anecdotal evidence. And what we found is that you probably do learn better in some modalities, like maybe you're a kinesthetic learner when it comes to learning how to play a board game, right? Probably listening to someone tell the instructions is not going to be the easiest way to learn it. But that doesn't mean that you're always learning in the same way. And once you start to think about it that way, you realize that, oh, actually, there are different times when I learn in different ways. And that's what direction we try to help people think in now.
It's so tricky too. And as you're talking, I'm like, it's like the different buyer types, like you're selling to different people who buy in different ways. And it's like the same with learning where like people learn in different ways. And like, while there might be like some people who learn better from podcasts or better from videos, I think that like one of the pieces that's missing is like the depth, right?
Yes. So, well, one of the things that really holds people back, because when I work with clients, we talk a lot about limiting mindsets, right? And executive function is the set of mental processes that help you get things done. And that includes learning. So if you are only thinking, I'm only going to learn this if I see something visual. You know, I had a student recently who told me, I'm a visual learner, so I'm just not understanding anything that you're saying. I said, okay, well, then let's talk about that. And so we looked at some ways that she could incorporate more visuals. I pointed out to her how I use visuals in my class. But what she really meant was that she just felt really disconnected because she had been told and believed about herself that she's a visual learner. So what I worked with her about instead was to kind of expand her view of herself and her brain, really, and get to thinking about, as you said, the depth of the knowledge that she could obtain if she embraced the sort of auditory side. And I'm also, you know, when I work with clients, when I work with students, I am not the lecture for an hour and a half kind of professor. So we're talking about like 10, 15-minute lectures. And so, you know, I really wanted to help her see that this is something she needs to kind of grow in so that she expands her opportunities for how she absorbs information and therefore critical thinking.
Yeah. And it's something too that like I talked about Bloom's taxonomy on another episode, right? But it's like you are if you're just listening to information all of the time, you're staying really low on that pyramid. You're not really like playing with the information. You're not testing it out. You're not like using your critical thinking skills. And so just like having different ways of accessing the information, that's going to like deepen the way that you think about it. And like, this is an example. When I was little, I did a lot of learning through books, right? And so I always thought Yosemite was Yosemite, always, because my parents are immigrants. I learned through reading. I never heard the word before. But it wasn't until like I heard somebody say it out loud that I was like, oh, okay. Wait, these two pieces of information, they're now connected. Like now I know that like that auditory is that it's actually Yosemite. And then it's like, then I still needed the visual of like, okay, here's some pictures of Yosemite. So I actually understood like, this is a national park in our country. And so it's like, just learning it in one way wasn't enough for me to like actually understand the whole concept. And that's like a very like simplified example. But I think that like, it speaks to like, you know, if you're only ever doing things in one way, you're going to miss out on like all of this perspective.
Yeah, perspective and opportunity as well. And that's a great example because when you're thinking about sort of experiencing life and trying to learn, you know, because when I work with students who are trying to improve their executive function, a lot of them are really unexcited about learning because it's hard, because they don't have, maybe their skills are underdeveloped when it comes to staying organized and focused and all that. So expanding adaptability and kind of getting rid of this old limiting belief about learning styles is really significant. Adaptability is one big part of executive function that, you know, it's how you interact in certain environments compared to others. You know, you're going to act differently in a school classroom than you are at a party with your friends. And because you're not trying to learn all in one way, then you can be more adaptable in different environments and therefore to different materials. And a lot of it comes down to self-labeling too. Like I was talking about the student earlier, the same student who might say, well, I'm not good at math, might really actually be saying, I'm struggling with this material and I don't know how to learn math, which is not, you know, it's a self-labeling thing, just like someone who's might say, I only learn things auditory or I only learn things through books or whatever.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like this idea of like flexibility was just like such a big part of like teaching second grade. Like, okay, like, yes, you would rather do things in this way, but like, you know, when you become a grown up, sometimes you don't have all of those options and you don't have all of that flexibility. So like being okay with that adaptability and being able to like put yourself in different situations and try on different ways of learning, I think is just like such an important skill that not everybody has. It's hard to know how to learn.
Yeah, and so mental flexibility is another word for it when we talk about categories of executive function. And what that really means is what you're saying is, can you try on different ways of doing things? And you might find that some things really don't work for you. You know, I joke with my clients that like there's a reason your planner is collecting dust in the corner of your room and it's never served you because it doesn't work for you. So let's find out something that does work for you. But the exception to that is when your middle school teacher tells you that you have to use that planner, you have no choice, right? So you can't just say, well, this doesn't work for me, I'm never filling it in, if that's the case. Then you go home and you use an alternate strategy, right? But that's really good for your brain also because you're developing a system that actually works for you and you're learning to adapt outside of structures that possibly are not natural for you.
And I think that, you know, what you're saying is making me think about when it comes to like being a coach, right? Or leading a membership or leading a course, the relationship piece of like, how do you actually know how to best support your clients? And it's like by building those relationships and like by seeing like, okay, these are the tools that are most helpful for this person. And then you start to like build your toolbox of like, okay, I actually have like these 7 tools and based on the person in front of me, what's going to be most helpful to them. And I think that's why like getting good at teaching takes so long, because you're just collecting tools.
Yeah, you're collecting tools and you're collecting ways of thinking. And that, I mean, that's part of why we have to think about ourselves in expanded ways too, because when you're a coach and you're trying to help people, you might also think to yourself, well, I only learn best if I read. So I'm going to give my clients, the people I'm trying to support, only text, right? When that's not going to work for everybody. And in education, Stacy, we call that differentiated instruction, don't we?
Yes, we do.
But for coaches, it's not something necessarily that you're trained in doing, is providing information in a variety of ways. So it is important to think like maybe this is most natural for you, but it's not the only way that people are going to respond to information. And you have to meet people where they are too. So if like with this student I was talking about, I wasn't going to say, well, your ideas are outdated and there's plenty of visuals in my class, so just figure it out, right? That's not helpful. So, when you're working with people, do figure out where they think they are and meet them there, and then help them grow from there with, a variety of learning methodologies.
And that's so important when you, like, so many of my clients like work with people who are neurodivergent and work with people who process information differently. And so when you really get into like working with high needs populations, like you really have to tap into like all these different strategies, because maybe watching videos isn't going to work, right? Or maybe just the podcast isn't going to work. And so really thinking about like, what are different ways to get to the same end result, and like how can we take that end result and backwards plan to actually like help your clients or help whoever you're working with get to that end place.
Right. I work with a lot of neurodivergent students, and they challenge me in a great way, because half the people in my house have ADHD. I have anxiety. So it's like we've got like whatever you can think of, my house probably has it going on. But every time a student comes to me with, they think that their brain is the problem when it's really not, right? We always try to celebrate the way that their brain works. And then I try to get them to think, if they've told me, oh, but I only learn, like, I can't focus if someone's just talking to me. That's not going to work for me. Then we start with that and we say, okay, well, then let's try a different way of interpreting this information. And then let's start small. Let's help you focus for 2 minutes on someone talking. Then it's 3, then it's 4, then it's 5. But let me give you some strategies on how to do that, instead of just saying, sit down and listen to me talk for 10 minutes. It's not providing people the sort of skills that they need. And that's really what coaches do, right? Is we help people build up their skills and mental flexibility in this case, so that they can be able to sort of operate more independently.
Yeah, right. You're bringing up this idea of like scaffolding, which we talk about a lot in the teacher world, but it's like, it is meeting people where they're at and really thinking about like, what are like the teeny little steps that they're going to take. And I think probably like as an executive functioning coach, you probably have clients that really struggle with like breaking down tasks.
Yeah. And a lot of times people want to skip to the end. You're talking about backwards planning. And so parents will come to me and they'll say, my kid has XYZ problems, so let's do one session and figure it out, like, and fix them sort of thing. And so when my response is, well, we're going to start by celebrating their brain and I'm going to teach them how to do a to-do list. It seems like such a small thing, but it's a huge thing. Because if someone has never learned how to do that, then they can't succeed, right? So it is expanding that idea of scaffolding and saying, like, here's where we want to get, but we're going to start really small and we're going to think about the way your brain works and we're going to help you expand it. But it's going to take some steps and it's going to take some effort, but we'll support you in that.
And I think that's the role of like, being a coach or being a teacher, is like holding that space for them and holding the vision for them and, slowly helping them get to where they want to go, and really thinking about the the ways to get there. So our listeners are mostly business owners. So when we're thinking about learning styles, what does this mean for their own learning? If you purchased a course or you're investing in a membership, how can you take this information and really use it to best serve your own learning?
So as coaches, we're always trying to improve ourselves, right? Which is great. We need to keep learning. And if you are thinking about your own professional development, then a good way to approach it is think about what you like to do, right? Like what are natural ways you respond to things, and think about how you respond to things in different arenas. So for example, I talked about the board game earlier. Maybe you're not playing board games as a coach. Maybe you should, but maybe you're not. And so what you're thinking about there is, if I'm trying to better my own learning, what's a way that I can incorporate movement into it? Maybe I'm going to listen to the podcast while I take a walk, or, something of that manner. So you can sort of combine styles at once to challenge your brain. You can just sort of notice what is working and where you find the most challenges. And one thing that you might see is that if you are attempting to learn in a way that's not comfortable to you, then you'll probably feel like putting that off, and maybe just getting started on it, which is another important executive function skill, is getting started. Just starting is an important part of trying anything new. So keep that in mind.
All right. So being open and combining different styles of learning. And I'm going to add one, which is make it fun. I'm like,
yes,
this is the second grade teacher in me, making it fun. And I think that there's, I think in the online space, there's so many courses that are here's the slides and here's me recording a video. But what are some ways of thinking about what are some different engagement methods that people can use? I personally love games. I try to incorporate games into my courses, into my marketing, because it's when you're having fun, you don't even realize you're learning. You're just learning. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, we could do a whole nother episode on gamification and gamified learning, but I respond really well to your weekly challenges where I get points. My brain eats that up.
Yes. Any chance to win something, Lauren's I'm there.
I am. First in line. That's right.
All right. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Is there any final pieces of advice that you have for the coaches listening or the course creators listening for how they show up to serve their clients?
Yeah, I think the more that you can increase your mental flexibility and your adaptability, the more your clients will see that. And they're going to respond to the fact that you're responsive to them and that you're also challenging them at the same time. So maybe your fun task for the week is to put yourself in a new situation or to learn something in a different way than you're used to.
I love that. So, Lauran, where can people connect with you to learn more about executive functioning and how to best support learners and how to best support their family through learning? How can they find you?
Go to alteringcourse.com, where all my socials are linked, and you can sign up for my free newsletter.
Amazing. Lauran sends out some great tips every 2 weeks. So if you want to dig more into this stuff, definitely check out her newsletter. And thank you so much for listening. Until next time. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to rate and leave a review on your preferred listening platform. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe for weekly episodes about how to make money and work with the dreamiest of clients without having to get dressed in the morning. Make sure to check out the show notes down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.